Section 8.1 is going to review two old formulas. We're going to talk about the midpoint formula and the distance formula, and these are both key formulas that you've had at various points before this. So the midpoint formula is really finding the coordinates, and that's the key. It is the xy of the midpoint. So if we were to look at a picture where point 1 is x1, y1, point 2 is x2, y2, where is this point xm, ym, so that these pieces are the same, the exact midpoint? And the way we do that is simply by averaging. You add the two x's, divide by 2, add the two y's, divide by 2, leave it as an xy. That's one of the biggest mistakes kids make, is then they add the two xy's together. Remember, you are finding a coordinate, finding a point. It does not matter if you say x2 plus x1 or x1 plus x2. You're really finding the average, add them up, divide by 2. So, finding a midpoint. In a landscape design, 2 square flower beds and a sprinkler halfway between them. So real life, you got to figure out where to put the sprinkler so it reaches both of them. The corners are at 4, 5 and 14, 13. So this is your x1, y1 and your x2, y2. You can see them dropped into the formula x and x right here, y and y right here. 4 plus 14 is 18, 5 plus 13 happens to be 18, so 9, 9 is your midpoint. Distance formula is also a formula that you have seen before. The distance, key thing here, is it's always positive. If you think about measuring the distance, you can't have a -3 length. Okay, so distance, and sometimes we talk about the length of something. If you remember from geometry, we're really talking about the distance formula. How long is it? How far is it from end to end? Now in this formula, the order matters. So distance is equal to the square root of, and make sure you square root everything, x2 minus x1, the quantity squared, plus y2 minus y1, the quantity squared. It is perfectly okay if I take x1 minus x2, the quantity squared, plus, as long as I start with y1 minus y2, the quantity squared. Remember your order of operations. You need to subtract. You need to square, then you need to add before square rooting. You have to complete all of those operations. It is wrong, and what kids will see and try to do a lot of times is if they end up with 4 squared plus 9 squared, and they will try to do 4 plus 9. You cannot take the square root across an addition sign. You really need to think about that like there's parentheses here. So remember, all of this has to happen before you square root it. Exact answers are best. So we want to simplify that radical using our skills of looking for perfect squares and reducing those radicals. If we're finding the distance between 2 points, again, if this is my x1, y1, x2, y2, we're going to put 4 minus 3. Now, careful with your signs. The formula says subtraction. If you put a minus in, it really becomes addition. Okay, but I recommend you write it out. -4 minus 6 ends up being -10. Please don't trust your calculator. If it tells you that this is -100, you need to know that is wrong, because the squared value is always positive. You can never end up with a negative under the radical for distance. That can't can't happen because you can't take the radical of a negative in real numbers. Square root of 149 is in lowest terms, so we are done. If you use a decimal, you need to carry at least one, if not two places for more accuracy. So find the farthest point. So this would be an example of a test question that might show up on an MCA exam. Which point is farthest from -1, 3? So really, you have to do the distance formula and find the biggest, the greatest distance. So it requires 4 distance formulas. You have to find the distance to each one of those points. Now, pictures lie, but if you wanted to, -1, there's my original point right here. If you wanted to take a quick sketch, there's 2, 4, 2, 4. There's -4, 1, 0, 5, and 3, -2. Okay, pretty sure 0, 5 is going to be closer. It might help you choose a little bit. Remember, pictures lie, but it might give you some ideas about if your answer is right or not looking at a visual. So it is a nice kind of semi-check. You don't need to take these answers out to decimals because obviously if you take the square root of 5, it's going to be smaller than the square root of 41. And so that means that this one is your final answer. And that is all there is to the lesson 8.1.